the 7th of November 2024. We get into our Capitalk Forum discussion, and as alluded to earlier, I am joined in the studio by Akili, Mr. Reuben Akili. He is director for Combined Harare Residents Association. I am also joined by Mr. Lisben Chipfunde. He is environment manager with the city of Harare. And joining me over the line is Ms. Jenna Hutchins, environmental activist. So let me welcome the gentleman and lady into the conversation. Ladies first, I suppose. So Jenna, good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Reuben.
Great, thanks. Good to have you in the conversation. Wonderful. Mr. Chipfunde, good evening and welcome to the program.
Good evening.
Thank you so much. Akili, thank you so much for joining us. Good evening.
Good evening, Reuben. Good evening, Harare.
Now, the root or the reason for this conversation this evening is against the background of a bottom-up community action that has recently been launched. It's a climate-friendly cities initiative to address Harare's pressing climate challenges. Perhaps let's start off. There's been a few issues around the decommissioning of waterworks, Prince Edward in 2023, resulting in a lot of citizen engagement around that issue, the need for policy development, and this is where the Residents Association has come in. But of course, there are key stakeholders involved, and this is why we also have the city of Harare here. So starting off, perhaps let me come to you, Mr. Chipfunde, on the aspects of policy, and this particular policy, for example, around climate change and having effective responses. Why is this sort of policy important for the city of Harare?
Thank you. It is key in terms of directing how we respond to environmental and climate action within the city. I'm sure you're aware that when you talk about issues to do with the environment and climate, these do impact a lot on the residents of Harare, particularly when you look at the vulnerable communities, the poor, the children, and the women. So our thinking is that as far back as 2019, the city realized that we need to put more focus, but we only have been going straight into producing action plans which are not directed from policy. Hence the need now to go to the people who are very key in terms of then actioning what happens, because most of these things happen in the local communities. That's why we are going down to the to the stakeholders who are the communities to tell us, rather than us telling them what is it that they would want to see in the policy, because they know best the things that do affect them.
That's such an important point there. Akili, I want to come to you. He brings out aspects of this co-creation of policies. What are your expectations as residents representatives from this proposed policy?
Thank you so much, Reuben. Thank you so much, Mr. Chipfunde, for highlighting the need, for this policy. So our expectations from residents, you realize, I like what Mr. Chipfunde is saying. Now we are going to the people.
Yeah.
It's the bottom up approach.
Absolutely.
Where the citizens' voice or the residents' voice is found in policy making. I think that's one of the most important component of policy development. When things start from the community going upwards, I think it helps the policy to be responsive. So one of our expectation is that the input from residents will be found in the policy document, or the footprint of citizen participation will find itself in the document. That's number one. But also, like from what Mr. Chipfunde has said, also how communities can play a role in the management of the environment. I think there's a concept, when I was in Borodale, we met a group of people from Borodale that said, how do we then, partner the local authority, probably using the community-based approaches or community stewardship approaches in conservancies, in managing wetlands, in managing waste. I think this is one of the most important aspects, which I think it needs to be very, very strong within the policy, so that it can also be able to remove the burden from the local authority in terms of, especially when you talk of waste management, even probably it might be but monitoring the wetland destruction. So again, you realize that when communities play a role under that community stewardship approach, it is the communities themselves that they are now policing each other, and it becomes very, very easy. So those are some of the things which we feel that the component of community stewardship in terms of environmental management, climate actioning, we strongly feel that it's something which is very, very important. But also more importantly, from what I said from before, that we expect the input from residents to be found in the document.
Exciting. I like the fact that it is a very inclusive document that will be created from the bottom up. Jenna, let's talk about some of the key issues or aspects that you believe should be covered by the climate and climate policy. What are some of the most pressing issues in your view?
Perspective, I'm actually a mother, and I think that our city is a place where children are growing up. And I think from a policy perspective, for laymen out there, a policy is made so that there's a roadmap. Essentially, it's wishing for what we would want. What do we see as our future? Do we want our children to be walking and cycling to school? Do we want safe streets because road traffic and all of these things come into creating dangerous environments, one from air pollution, from road traffic crashes, connecting all of these things that actually affect the average person in our city. Cities are obviously where 70% of children will live by 2050. That's a huge statistic. So if our cities are not designed for children in mind, then we're not doing the best that we possibly can. We have to look at the sustainability dimensions, and that's actually where environmental policy comes in. It's looking at the environment, it's also looking at the social aspect, and it's also looking at the economics. And in our current situation, where we need to change is actually our economic model. Our economic model is pushing for more in terms of growth development products, which obviously, you start a system of taking, using, and throwing away. And from this perspective, we can't sustain that sort of model. So we need to be starting to look at circularity. We need to be looking at who is creating waste. Who are the organizations that actually push plastic out into the communities? How do we then recover that waste? In terms of aluminium, for instance, there's enough aluminium above ground that we don't actually need to mine any more aluminium. That's a statistic that's been proven, and therefore circularity within our economics would be able to say, okay, we're starting where we are, let's use what we have and doing what we can with what's on the ground. And from a policy perspective, we need to realize that actually the global north has already developed. It's at a level where it's already got to a point where their systems are working. In terms of Africa and Asia, those are the two areas of our world where we're going to see nearly double our population by 2040. So this is huge. From a population expansion perspective, if we're not thinking from a what do we have, what can we use perspective, and being a little bit careful and clever, we can't possibly expand our carbon budget. So if we look at the amount of carbon emissions or the amount of environmental damage that has already happened to this point in time, we actually don't have a budget left. We've reached our threshold in terms of what our planet can actually sustain. And if we're not thinking about other ways and trying to leapfrog the examples of what the global north have already done, we don't stand to make equitable cities. And this is where the policy needs to address. It needs to ensure that in all of our processes, we're looking at the environment, we're looking at the social context, we are looking at the economics, and we're making sure that our cities are safe, resilient, accessible, and equitable. And I talk about cities because actually the global population, 50% of our global population live in cities. So this is a huge statistic. Zimbabwe at the moment has 30% of its population living in cities. So there's huge pressure on all systems, whether it's your social networking, how much more you're going to actually not be able to meet the person on the side of the road if we're all getting into a car and driving off, and the children who actually walk to school. What type of environment are they living in if we don't start looking at the policies that lend themselves to transport policies? If we can get more people out of cars, we obviously are targeting one of the biggest contributors to carbon emissions, which is transportation. If we start thinking about how we organize our city in terms of the transportation system, and we start just being a little bit more clever, when do logistics happen? How do we make sure that these heavy vehicles actually travel at a different time to free up our roads for more necessary processes? This is all the things that actually, from a social perspective, rather than just looking at an environmental perspective, we can actually see why we would do these things, which I think when we talk about climate change, it's a little bit off our radar. Not everyone in Zimbabwe can think about the implications of how climate change will affect them. But if we can look at it from the perspective of, I'm a mother, my child needs to get to school. If they have to walk to school and they get hit on the way to school, that's not a good thing.
Thank you so much, Jenna. You mentioned, quite a lot of scary statistics, I'll tell you that. I said, what? I totally hear you, Jenna. Let me come back to the studio here as we continue to talk about this very important subject. The issues of getting everyone else on board are definitely very important. Mr. Chipfunde, I want to come back to you. Let's talk about the mechanisms that have been put in place for citizen participation in the policy development.
Thank you. What we've done is we have a timetable that we have developed where we'll be going to various wards in the city, where we will just go and introduce the subject, and our role will be just to listen and record what the residents of Harare want to be included in the policy, and then we will then package it in such a way that these words are not the same. The challenges that people in Glenview, for example, are confronted with are not the same as those that you would probably find in Highlands or in Marlborough, or they are so different. So we wanted to capture these and then be able to address them at the local level and ensure that there's participation. People know what the challenges that they are facing, things that affect them. So our role will be just to then put it together as experts, but we will have had what things, challenges that the people are being affected by, and then we capture this. Then after the policy, we'll then develop strategies and then the action plans, and obviously there will be budgets required to then be able to deal with those challenges. Thank you.
I like the fact that you're just going to listen to the residents and record. Does this mean everything the residents say will be taken on board, Chipfunde? Or I'm just asking to speak to the issue of inclusivity in terms of, you know, the diversity even of contributions. Akili also how the residents are supposed to put their grievances forward. But I'm just interested to hear from you. How far does the listening ear really go?
Our wish is that because you know, if you don't then include everybody, then people will not be able to. Then people will say, this is not our document, and they will not be able to participate. You know, it brings in a lot of excitement when someone then looks at things that they would have said and see them happen. They will participate. But if you introduce something that was, or you try to doctor some certain things that the people say they want to see happening in their communities, and you don't include it, then there will be limited participation. We want to bring excitement. We want to bring people to be wanting to understand that they are part of that, and they are making a contribution in their local communities.
Fantastic. You know, enhancement of citizen participation in this policy development. How are you going to ensure this is happening? More importantly, how do we curate the quality of contributions? As I'm thinking, I know you can't have 1,000-page document. Maybe you can. At 2,000, there's a limit. You know, you know, how are you going to ensure that it is curated in a way that even the city council can access and can develop further into the final document?
Thank you so much. So from a CHRA perspective, what we have also started to do on our own, especially around with our residents, is also to educate them around the issues of environment, around the issues of climate, but also climate awareness, but also more importantly, sharing the importance of climate action planning with Mr. Chipfunde saying, and also local environmental action planning at community level. So again, the awareness will then help communities to be able to understand these whole issues, so that at the end of the day, when they go there, they're not going to go with a wish list, but again, there are some key areas around environment and climate which they will contribute to. Furthermore to that, we from a residents' perspective, again, we will mobilize people so that Mr. Chipfunde's meeting will not have 2 people.
Yes.
So that's another issue, because sometimes we have seen even, you know, during budget meetings where probably consultations would have been done, but there will be 7 people, you know, again, which demonstrate again another weakness on the residents' side.
Say, a bit of apathy.
Exactly, apathy. So we want also to deal away with apathy. So civic educational awareness can also be able to help deal with apathy. Also in giving assurance to the people that, you know, this document is very, very important. Also, your input matters. So that's what we'll be doing. But again, we've been educating from CHRA. I think what we have done in the past 2 weeks, we have established what we call environmental hubs, the environment and climate hubs in Harare. I think in about 30 wards. So in 30 wards, we have now a group of people who will be pushing the environment and climate agenda at community level, which then will go a long way in sustaining even the actions which the local authority, the policy, and even some of the things which the local authority would have also loved to sail through, and even to sustain some of the changes which would have been happened. So basically, that's what we'll be doing here.
And it's impressive that 30 wards, you say that this program is running currently. So we look forward to the remaining 16 wards, isn't it? Jenna, I want to come back to you. What do you think the role of residents or environmentalists should be in the creation of this climate policy?
I think also what needs to be done as well is to look at existing structures and how things are actually being done to try and align the environmental and climate policy with what's already happening, and to strengthen those links, because there's co-benefits to so many things. For example, if you look at your city through the eyes of a caregiver and a child, I've recently just been on a course called the Urban 95 Academy, and this is actually looking at your city from the height of a 95 centimeter child. So when you do that, you actually realize that health and social systems and education all need to be linked. So when you're designing your public space or your areas, we need to try and see what's going to be good for children within our environment, because essentially if you can get your children immunized and you can stop disease spreading and these sorts of things, that's dealing with environment and health issues, and essentially there's cost-cutting and cost benefits that can be tapped into that are already there. So when we talk about budgets, we actually need to look at the budget lines on all the existing budgets that are submitted and see which ones align with climate policy. And then we also look at the departments within each, the municipality, for instance, where you link your water with your health, with your environment departments, to see how you can actually come together and use the budgets that you've already got to achieve the common goal. So as residents, we can obviously give feedback on what we're facing within our communities. And I know that Mr. Chipfunde said about Glenview 8, and this is an area that has massive waste dump sites. So we need to link the departments together that would actually deal with waste, because that's air, land, and water pollution, and then bring in the experts from UZ or the University of Zimbabwe in terms of their early child development sector or their soil analysis, and be able to actually create a really composite structure of how people can actually find solutions to problems. And you know, a lot of these things are linked to behavior as well. So we need to understand our communities, and the communities know their problems, as Mr. Chipfunde said. And that's where the key. Serious action. We can't stand and wait to you know, not to implement things. So
are very important. I like the fact that a lot of these things do encourage this co-creation, the council getting exactly what the people's needs are, and also more importantly that these environmental needs are interconnected. And it's important to not only look at it from an environmental standpoint, there are also several issues that cut across. Coming back to you, Mr. Chipfunde, perhaps you can highlight for us, you know, the key stages in the policy development. You did say there would be an outreach where people would come forward and you have that exchange of ideas and so forth. What then happens next? What's the roadmap, perhaps, from that engagement to a policy actually then being produced?
What we'll then do is, once we've compiled the input from the stakeholders, remember it's a bottom-up approach, we'll then call in other departments, for example, in the city of Harare, who are also going to contribute, because we have got, for example, the Department of Planning, we have got Department of Works, where your amenities is the waste management, and the roads, you have your finance, your human capital, Harare Water. All those departments will then be brought together with other stakeholders. For example, government. In government, we have the Ministry of Environment, we have the Ministry of Local Government, we have the parastatals, your Environmental Management Agency, and other key stakeholders will be brought together, and the policymakers, the councillors. When we are going to the communities, the councillors will be there, but they also have a second chance to be also in this a level up from the bottom stakeholders, where we'll be discussing what we have come from the people from the community, the residents from the communities, and then from there we'll then produce the document which will be tabled before council. We probably even advertise, because when we do this exercise, there are chances that you may miss one or two contributions which may be key. So at times we'll then even advertise and see whether we can get further contribution to the policy. Thereafter, it will be then tabled before the council, who are the key, the apex of council, and then from there the policy will then guide what my colleague, sorry, I'm not good at remembering names, my colleague Jenna, yes, what Jenna was talking about will then guide. For example, what she was talking about will be then the local environment action planning. From the policy, it's guided from the policy. We have your climate action planning, you have your the resilient planning, a lot of programs that we can come up from, and even the partnership which she was referring to will be very key. And even education, the research with the higher institutions of higher learning, we also have partnerships. In other countries, like for example South Africa and the other world, they have partnerships. They usually term them EPIC, which means education in partnership in innovation in communities, where you have students embedded in the structures of the city to gather data, to produce the researches that will guide the how we then improve and maintain the implementation of the plans that will be guided from the police.
We certainly hope it will be epic indeed, an epic project. Coming to you, Akili, we're fast coming to the end of the program, but looking forward and looking at what you are intending to do here in conjunction with the City Council, how can this policy address environment and climate issues in Harare?
Thank you so much. I think Mr. Chipfunde highlighted some of the key issues to say. Maybe let me say in Shona. So this policy, so it's foundation of any intervention around environment and climate. So that is very, very important. Even from what Jenna was speaking about, to say the budget. Again, what then informs the budget is what is the policy and it's the policy itself. So and the strategic plan, which would then having the action plans. So it's very, very important that we understand that this whole thing it's going to change the way even the environment is managed in the city. I like even from what Mr. Chipfunde said, and also Jenna was saying, to say there are some linkages within the local authorities. How do we then ensure that there is coordination? Maybe probably even the police itself should spell out coordination among different, because we have the municipal police, which then probably monitor pollution, isn't it, or even monitor land degradation, and we've got probably the Department of Housing, which probably owns a place. The DO is a local person there. We have got even the Development Control Unit, which comes from the Department of Planning. Yes. So you can actually see that there is a need. So there is something which is very, very important to say. The police also needs to speak to the issues of coordination at departmental level, and it makes it very, very easy in terms of implementation. That's what I can say. But again, we are very, very much excited, Rumbi, for this opportunity which the city of Harare has come up with, and we're also willing to be part of this process. In fact, what they've done, it's something which is a rare situation. I think you realize that even in some areas, people always complain that we're not included, but this is an opportunity where the local authority is saying, you residents, come here. What is your story? Tell us your story. And then you tell yourself, and then you say, wait, why are you lamenting? Bring the people. We have provided the platform for engagement, and bring your ideas. So the local authority is saying to the residents, bring your ideas, and as residents, we are also going to mobilize around that. There's something which is interesting before I part my words here, which I discovered, which also Mr. Chipfunde was highlighting, to say this policy also will have a component of disaster risky. reduction. Remember, we have got natural disasters. In Masvingo, I think all of us we have been seeing videos in Masvingo about the flash floods, and we are not immune. Look, our Budiriro, even our Tafara, they always have some of these challenges. And again, this police again will also help us. How can we be able to be responsive to such natural disasters? So this is going to be, I would say, an important document for the city. And again, we'd like also to thank, I think, the government for setting the agenda there at the top there in coming up with the environment and climate policy at that national level. And again, the climate bill. I think all of us, we know that the government is pushing for the climate bill, which will also try to address the issues. Probably this is complicated climate credits issues, whatever. But again, at local level now, I think this, in Harare, I think it will be the first of its own, even around the local authority. So so it's very, very exciting, and again, the way it is structured, it's coming from the ground, going upwards, which is something which we have been yearning for, democratic local governance. Thank you so much, Reuben.
Fantastic. There's a message that's coming here from one of our listeners. I thought, let me read this and then come to you, Chipfunde, for your closing. It's my Matipa who says she passed by Copacabana today. Shikanza kanzuru iri kugona zvachose vakagadzira panorasirwa marara zvave neodha yakanaka dai zvaramba zvakadaro vachitakura marara guta redu rinoita undere. So I thought, it's always good to give these very important updates. So there is a lot being done to alleviate a lot of Harare's woes. But as we bring this conversation to a close, what can residents of Harare look forward to? Chipfunde, I know this has been a very, as Akili says, it's a great first step in coming to meet the residents at their point of need from a bottom-up perspective. So what is to follow for the residents of Harare?
We are looking forward that they should come and participate. We have produced a timetable on Monday. Coming next Monday, we'll be in Borodale. The next day in Kambuzuma, Warren Park, Zwarasekwa on the 13th, Waterfalls on the 14th, Mbare on the 15th, Highfields on the 18th, Glenview on the 18th, Mabuko on the 19th, Sunningdale on the 19th, CBD 20th, Budiriro 1 and 2 on the 21st, Avondale on the 21st, Mfakos on the 22nd, and the Kwadzana on the 22nd. So our anticipation is that people should come in their numbers, and then do not say we were not involved.
What time does it start?
We start at 9 o'clock in most of these programs. But where the dates, like for example in Highlands and Glenview, which are on the same date, will then be it will be 1 to 3 in the afternoon. But all the others, it will be from 9 to 11. But there's an opportunity to even extend beyond the 2 hours that we have allocated. If people are still wanting to input into the document, we are there to listen. We will be not doing anything else but going all out to get their views, so that we produce something that people will be able to say, this is our document, this is their seat. Us, we are officials, we are engaged, we are employees. We want them to tell us what things to run with. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. Really, really looking forward to all of this happening. I will get a list of the dates and venues from my guests so that I can continue to share it with you throughout the duration of the show. But I am very tickled pink and looking forward to a lot more engagement around this creation of a climate policy for the city of Harare. Jenna Hutchins, we lost her on the line there, but many thanks to you. Jenna is an environmental activist, and she definitely did open up our eyes to all the layers and multi-sectors that do go to environmental issues, and of course they must be included in this policy. Mr. Lisben Chipfunde, City of Harare Environment Manager, and of course we've got Akili, CHRA Director, Combined Harare Residents Association. We do thank you for coming together in this initiative, and we look forward to seeing the fruits of this particular engagement. I'm so excited about the conversation, and I know that we can restore Harare's Sunshine City status. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and for your insights. Thank you so much. Good night.